The ceremony was grander than anything I'd ever imagined. Gold-lined banners swayed from the arched ceiling of the Hall of Mana. Every crystal lantern pulsed with soft azure light, bathing us in a glow that felt strangely sacred. Rows of students, most clad in tailored uniforms and polished boots, stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the moment their destinies would be unveiled. I was standing at the edge, not because I wanted to, but because no one left space for the kid from the border villages. My heart pounded louder than the ceremonial drums echoing from the front dais. 100 names had already been called. Mages of fire, thunder, and even shadow had stepped forth to brilliant light shows as their systems awakened in front of the Academy's overseers. My fingers clenched tighter around the worn hem of my tunic. My name hadn't been called yet. It was fine. I didn't mind. Or maybe I did. A little. Very, Zing. The words came like a hammer wrapped in silk. A few students glanced over. A couple of them chuckled. They'd seen my clothes. Knew I didn't belong here. A scholarship student in a hall full of aristocrats. I stepped forward, ignoring the fluttering in my stomach. The awakening pedestal stood at the center of the room, a slab of rune-carved stone with a glowing sigil at its center. One step, then another. The magic in the air grew thicker with each breath. I knelt, placing my palm on the stone. The moment I touched it, my vision shattered. A rush of blue light flooded my mind, like the ocean crashing in reverse, pulled inward, not out. Words appeared in golden script, burned into my sight. System awakened. Welcome, Aiden varies. Class, Mage, Commenteer. Affinity, Wind, Kinetic. Trait, Efficient Allocation System. Converts experience milestones into additional stat points. Skill progression increased by comprehension rate. Status, Newborn Spellcaster. Skills available. Wind Whistle, Minor Kinetic Push. Wait, what? I blinked. The words hung there, shimmering faintly, then faded into the background of my vision. Like a menu tucked away. I could call it forth whenever I wanted. But none of that mattered right now, because I had no idea what any of it meant. The light from the pedestal dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Unlike the students before me, there was no elemental burst, no surge of flame or crackle of lightning. Just a soft breeze. I stood up slowly. The overseer, an older mage with a trimmed white beard, furrowed his brow. Commenteer Mage, Wind and Kinetic Affinity, he announced, the disappointment thinly veiled in his tone. Somewhere in the crowd, someone snorted. Well, someone's going to be great at sweeping leaves. A voice whispered loud enough to carry. Laughter trickled through the hall like a spreading stain. I walked back to my place, heart pounding, not from excitement, from something far colder. Embarrassment, shame, but deeper still was a flicker of something else. Something quiet, focused, possibility. The dorms were colder than I'd expected. Wooden floors, one bed, a rickety desk, a shelf stacked with academy scrolls I'd have to memorize in the coming weeks. My roommates hadn't arrived yet, or maybe I didn't have any. Either way, I was alone. That was fine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, closed my eyes, and summoned the screen again. Status, Name, Aiden varies. Class, Mage Common. Level 1, STR, 3, AGI, 5, Int 7, Vit 4, Dex 6, Free Points, 0. Trait, Efficient Allocation System. Skills, Wind Whistle, LV1, Minor Kinetic Push, LV1. No power-ups, no hidden bloodline, just me, a few numbers, and 2 spells that sounded like they'd barely knock over a leaf. I activated Wind Whistle. A soft breeze tickled the edge of my palm. That was it. Then I activated Minor Kinetic Push. A subtle force tugged against a book on my desk. It slid an inch before settling again. Huh, they weren't impressive. But something else caught my eye. Minor Kinetic Push, LV1-5. Progressing rapidly. Comprehension-based advancement active. My eyes widened. I had only cast the spell once. How had it jumped for levels? I tried it again, this time focusing on how the spell felt. The way mana left my core, traveled through my arm, and responded to thought. Minor Kinetic Push, LV5-6. Spell control improved. Plus 1 DX. Skill acceleration active. So that's what this trait meant. It wasn't just faster. It rewarded comprehension. Understanding made me grow. That was something I could work with. I didn't need flash. I didn't need bloodlines. If I could learn fast, I could catch up. No, I could surpass them. But I need a lot more practice. And something to test myself against. A week passed in a blur. Classes were mostly theory, lectures on mana flow, elemental resonance, spell frameworks. I paid attention. Always. Even when I was dead tired. Even when I hadn't eaten enough because I was saving scholarship coin for spell scrolls. Most students ignored me. A few scowled. I didn't care. I practiced in the spare hall behind the dorms after dark, casting wind whistle until I could form directional gusts. Kinetic push evolved into small pulses I could angle off walls. Each night, I leveled up something. Slowly. Efficiently. The system kept rewarding me. Wind whistle, LV19. Minor kinetic push, LV611. Trait bonus activated. +1 free stat point every 5 skill levels. It wasn't flashy, but was mine. Then came the first duel class. We stood in a wide, dueling ring behind the academy. Stone floor, chalked edges, instructor watching from a high seat. Pair up, he barked. This is evaluation, not punishment. Don't hold back. I didn't get a chance to pick. A boy named Leon, all smug grin and flashy gloves, stepped forward. I'll take the leaf blower, he said. Laughter again. I nodded quietly, stepped into the ring, and tried to ignore the weight pressing against my ribs. He used fire. Of course he did. A snap of his fingers, and a narrow flame danced around his wrist. Try not to fall over too quickly, he smirked. I didn't respond. The match started. He moved first. A narrow jet of fire shot toward my shoulder. I slid sideways, wind pushing from behind my feet. Wind whistle cast backward. It wasn't meant for mobility, but it worked. He blinked. Huh. Thought that was a gust trick. I didn't wait. Kinetic push low and fast, aimed at his legs. He stumbled. I pushed again, this time at a stone near his foot. It rolled under him. He fell. Not hard, just enough to scramble. I moved in. Wind whistle, directed at his chest. He skidded backward. Then he growled and sent a burst of flame wider. I threw up both hands, trying to pull air around me in a rush. The blast came. Heat grazed my sleeve. The air sizzled. Pain prickled, but it wasn't real fire. Safety wards dulled the worst of it. I didn't stop. Push, push, whistle, push. His balance broke again. I didn't win by overpowering him. I won because he couldn't hit me. When the instructor called the match, the silence was different. Not mockery. Confusion. Interesting use of mobility, the instructor said. Crude but effective. You understood your limits. Leon scowled. He's just lucky. But the instructor only raised a brow. Luck that repeats is called strategy. I stepped out of the ring, chest heaving, palms tingling from residual mana. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt the faintest sense of belonging. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to win beautifully. I just needed to keep learning, keep training, keep adapting. Because one day, I'd face the entrance exam for Irisfield University, and I'd pass it. Wind isn't a kind element. It slips through your fingers. Evade structure. Answers only to instinct, and even then, only just. For the past 3 nights, I've been coming to the old training shed behind Dorm C. It wasn't glamorous. Just cracked stone tiles, warped dummies, and rusted spell markers on the wall. Most students went to the official training halls. The sponsored ones, at least. Me? I had this. In my system. I knelt down and placed both hands on the floor. Cold stone met my fingers. The hour was late, and mist clung to the ground like a ghost trying to remember its body. I closed my eyes. Skill activated. Wind whistle, LV9. The mana flowed, thin and fussy. I could feel it now. Not just as an idea, but like a second heartbeat pulsing along my skin. A ripple. Weak but real. The gust fired forward. It hit the dummy. Sort of. It was a soft pat, like slapping a pillow. I sighed. Still too scattered. Still leaking control. I sat back, breathing slowly. Control wasn't strength. It was focus. One thread at a time. One line of force. The system flickered in my sight. Wind whistle. Progress. 92% to LV10. Tip. Try adjusting output compression. Compression. That was the word I'd been missing. I stood, took position again, and narrowed my focus. Imagine a tube, I told myself. Not a blanket of wind, a funnel. Pointed, directed, less spread, more bite. This time when the gust fired, it was thinner, sharper. The dummy shook. And then, wind whistle, LV10. Evolution path available. Choose one. Stream form, continuous wind line, low damage, sustained. Burst form, high pressure pulse, short range, high impact. I blinked. Evolution? I hadn't seen this before. Was it part of my trade? I read both options carefully. Stream form seemed suited for battlefield control, maybe pinning enemies or controlling movement. Burst form looked more aggressive. I chose burst form. The moment I selected it, something clicked inside me. A shift in the mana. More forceful, less gentle breeze, more condensed shove. I tried immediately. The wind surged forward like a punch. The dummy rocked on its base, nearly tipping over. New skill acquired. Wind burst. LV1. Trait bonus. Comprehension detected. Wind burst. LV1 3. I stood there, stunned for a second. Only one cast, and it jumped 2 levels. The system wasn't just generous. It was rewarding insight. Thought. Reflection. If I could keep that up, if I could evolve every basic spell into something practical, I could build my own fighting style from the ground up. Later that day, I walked into spell theory class with a bit more energy in my step. Instructor Varen, a tall, thin woman with eyes like polished metal, stood at the front chalkboard drawing elemental channels. The lesson today was about mana route overlap, when 2 spells interfere with each other due to shared circuit paths. Most students yawned through it. I scribbled every word in my notes, because last night I felt it. That moment when wind whistle broke into wind burst. It hadn't been about power. It was about refining the mana route. I raised my hand. She glanced at me. Yes, varies. Is it possible to chain spells without interference if you manually route the second spell around the first residual pattern? The class turned. It wasn't a flashy question, but it was sharp. Varen's gaze narrowed. In theory, yes, but it requires above-average mana control. Why do you ask? I'm testing chain techniques, I said. Some students chuckled. One even muttered, as if a wind mage needs chains. I ignored them. The instructor tilted her head. You're only first rank. Most students don't attempt chains until 3rd. I like a try, I said. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. Then write me a paper on residual routes and propose a working sequence. If it's not idiotic, I'll allow you to test it during a supervised session. That was better than I expected. Back in the training shed that night, I attempted what I'd been imagining since class. The idea was simple. Kinetic push first, to move the enemy or object. Follow up with wind burst in the direction they were forced toward, catching the mid-step. Push and burst. Move and strike. But spells weren't arrows. They left behind threads of mana. Interference could cause both to misfire. First try, the dummy barely wobbled. Kinetic push failed because wind burst activated too early. Second try, the 2 spells tangled. The wind blew backward. I gripped my teeth. Third try, I waited, felt the pulse of the push settle, then fired the burst in a diagonal path. The wind slammed into the dummy just as it tipped forward. Chain concept, push burst. Detected, mana efficiency plus tactical insight. Wind burst, LV3-5. Minor kinetic push, LV11-13. Chain bonus activated, +1 free stat point. I stared at the message, then laughed, quiet and short. I was building a fighting style, not mimicking someone else's spells, not just casting from memory. I was engineering magic, and it was working. The next day, Garen Holt cornered me at lunch, not with threats, with a half-eaten meat bun and a blunt look. You're the kid who knocked Leon on his pompous ass last week, he said. I blinked. Yes. I run dungeon drills in the Westfields. We go in small, hit hard, and rotate clean. You come with us tomorrow. You'll be in the back. Don't get killed. Why me? I asked. You don't panic when things go weird. That's rare. Also your wind. I need pushback and mobility in my lineup. Then he walked off, still chewing. I sat there, processing. A dungeon run. My first real one. Suddenly, everything felt heavier, but also more real. That night, I stared at my system window again. Wind burst, LV5. Minor kinetic push, LV13. Trait bonus, +2 stat points available. Total free points, 3. Suggestion. Increase AGI or INT for spell velocity. I placed 2 points into AGI, 1 into INT. My hands trembled. Tomorrow, I'd enter a dungeon. Not a training room, not a classroom exercise. A real fight, with real risk. But I wouldn't go in empty-handed. I'd go in with spells I'd sharpened by sweat, with techniques no one had taught me, and with a system that grew stronger the more I understood magic. Not just used it. Let them call me weak. Let them laugh again. In the dungeon, understanding would become strength, and I would rise, one spell at a time. The grass in the west field was damp with dew when I arrived. Thin morning mist clung low to the earth. Beyond the fence line, jagged stone arches framed the entry gate to the dungeon. It pulsed with a soft purple glow. Mana shimmered faintly in the air around it, like heat ripples on a summer road. This was a beginner-level gate, the Academy's assigned dungeon. Even still, the feeling in my gut was sharp and coiled. This wasn't class anymore. This was real. Berries, Garen said, tossing a rolled-up rope toward me. Strap your pack tight. You drop gear in there. We don't go back for it. I caught it with fumbling hands. Garen stood with 2 others, a red-haired girl named Sel and a quiet, thick-armed boy named Darren. I'd seen him in the combat hall. Strong, sharp, focused. Not the kind of people who normally call my name. Your back line, Garen said again, pointing. You cast only when we're engaged. Watch our flanks. If we retreat, you slow what's chasing us. Nothing fancy. I nodded once. My fingers were already cold. We stepped through the gate. The transition hit like a cold wind to the face. One moment I was standing on dew-covered grass. The next, I was in darkness lit only by floating crystal veins embedded in the walls. The dungeon air smelled like wet stone and iron. Distant echoes whispered from further inside, too rhythmic to be wind. A pulse rolled under my feet. Mana. Alive. Faint but watching. Sel pulled out a dagger and whispered spell. Her blade hummed with light. One path. No forking yet. Tracks say small host passed through here recently. Goblins, probably. Garen turned to me. You know how they fight? I nodded. Quick. Swarm tactics. Ambush hunters. Tools but no magic. Good. Don't freeze when they scream. I swallowed and followed. The first engagement came fast. Garen spotted movement and raised a fist. We dropped low. 3 goblins rushed in, screeching. Crew blades. Crooked teeth. They were smaller than I expected. Almost child-sized. But the way they moved, hunched, coordinated, made my stomach turn. Sel ducked and drove her blade into one's throat before I even processed what I was seeing. Darren took the second with a hammer blow. The third turned to run. Back line. Garen snapped. I move on instinct. Wind burst. Kinetic push. A quick combo. Rough, but reflexive. The burst hit the goblin mid-back. It stumbled forward just as the push lifted its foot. It fell headfirst into the cavern wall with a sickening crack. Wind burst. LV 5-6. Minor kinetic push. LV 13-14. System note. Spell combo efficiency plus 10%. My breath hitched. I never hit something like that before. Never heard that kind of sound. I stood there, shaking slightly, as the others moved past. Clean hit, Garen muttered. Don't hesitate next time. Next time, right. I followed, heart pounding in my ears. We moved deeper. The halls narrowed. The light dimmed. We passed crude signs, claw marks on walls, blood-stained feathers. Goblins weren't intelligent in the way humans were, but they understood territory. This dungeon wasn't just random stone. It was infested. Stop, Sel whispered. Ahead, we saw it. An open chamber. 6 goblins. One larger. A chieftain, maybe. They were clustered around something burning in a stone bowl. A ritual. Garen tapped my shoulder. You're gonna help me break their line, he said. Wait for my charge. As soon as I hit them, you launch wind burst at their left flank. Sel and Darren will handle the right. Got it. I nodded. My throat was dry. My knees didn't feel steady, but I focused. Watched the patterns. Listened. 1 breath. 2. Then Garen moved. He shot forward like a cannonball, slamming into the nearest goblin with his shield. Sel darted left. Darren roared and swung wide. I saw my window. Wind burst. Quick and angled. Not just at the goblins, at the stone bowl behind them. The burst struck. Flame spilled. 2 goblins shrieked as the fire caught on the hem of their ragged cloaks. The others scattered. One turned and charged at me. Its eyes were wild. I stepped back but too slow. The goblin lunged, blade raised. I panicked. Kinetic push, but my aim was off. The goblin's blade grazed my arm. Pain burned sharp. Instinct took over. I dropped, rolled, and pushed again, this time hitting the goblin square in the chest. It flew back into a pillar. Dead. Minor kinetic push, LV 14-15. Trait milestone, +1 bonus stat point. Wind burst, LV 6-7. Spell chain combo, push plus wind. Recognized. Efficiency boost, active. I sat there, breathing hard, arms stinging. The fight was over, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Garen approached, shield slung over his shoulder. "You alright?" I nodded, slowly. He crouched down and tied a strip of cloth around my cut. "First blood always rattles. You didn't freeze. That matters." "Barely helped," I muttered. "You helped," he said flatly. "Most new casters waste half their mana panicking. You didn't. You aimed. You adapted." I said nothing, because inside me, there was a fracture forming. I wasn't afraid of goblins. I was afraid of how real it had been. The blood, the sounds, the way my spell broke something alive. I knew this was part of being a mage, but knowing didn't make it easier. That night, back in my dorm, I stare at my status window. Level up, 2-3. Free points, 3. Stat growth, +1 INT, +1 AGI. Bonus from trait, +1 additional point. Total unused, 4. I placed 2 into INT, 2 into AGI. I didn't feel stronger. Not physically, but the casting got sharper. Quicker, less strain. Like the spell wanted to work with me now, not against. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the goblin screech. The crack against the pillar. Kept replaying that moment where I cast out of panic and missed. That couldn't happen again. Not if I wanted to survive the deeper levels. Not if I wanted to pass the university exam. So I stood up, quietly, slipped out of the dorm, and went back to the training shed. My arms were sore. My fingers shook. My eyes burned from fatigue. But I practiced anyway. Push, burst, chain, push, burst. Again, I'd cast until I stopped shaking. Because if I could train enough to make the next fight feel like training, then maybe I wouldn't panic. Maybe I'd win. Maybe I'd live. I didn't go to class the next morning. I wasn't sick. I wasn't skipping. I just couldn't stop thinking. Every blink brought back the goblin's scream. The way its limbs crumpled after my push spell hit harder than I intended. I could still feel the strain in my casting arm. The pull of mana, not quite refined enough. I wasn't traumatized exactly, just aware that I'd lived, and that it could have gone differently. The training shed's doors creaked open before sunrise. I stepped inside, hands stiff, mind already playing scenes like they were on a loop. The mistakes, the near miss, the first blood. My system hovered in the corner of my vision, calm as ever. Wind burst, LV 7. Minor kinetic push, LV 15. Trait bonus pending. Chain memory. Push, burst, mastery, 43%. The numbers didn't care how I felt. The dungeon wouldn't either. So I cast. Again and again. Push, burst, push, burst. Until my mana ran low. Until my arms burned. Until the spell was so clean I could cast it mid-breath. Then I sat back, drenched in sweat. My hands trembled. Not with fear, with exhaustion. The door creaked. I jumped to my feet, but it was only Garen. He leaned in the doorway, chewing on an apple, eyes scanning the marks I'd worn into the floor. "You're up early," he said. "Didn't sleep." He took another bite, then tossed the core aside. "Good. We're heading back in." "What?" "New team rotation. Training hall assigned you to my squad for the next 2 weeks. You want credits, don't you?" "Ah, yeah, I do." Garen nodded, then turned to leave. "Get some water. We move in an hour. This time, we go deeper." I stared after him, and the knot in my stomach returned. The second dungeon run didn't wait. We descended quickly. First chamber, empty. Second, 2 goblins, taken out without issue. Third, a choke point leading into a wide tunnel that sloped downward. "We're entering a natural cave section," Cell said, torch in hand. Less artificial structure, more wild layout. Darren was already setting chalk markers on the wall. "Trap risk increases past this point," Garen warned. "Backline, that's you. Needs to prep movement spells." I nodded, readying wind burst in my palm. The tunnel air was heavier here, warmer, like the dungeon was breathing. Then came a sound, chittering, fast, numerous. Garen raised his hand, then hissed, "Fall back." I didn't ask questions. The shadows around the bend exploded. 6 goblins, smaller but faster. Frenzied. Fastlings, Cell growled. Ambush variants. Darren blocked the first with his shield. Garen pushed back 2 more, but the last 3 didn't charge the front. They leapt sideways onto the wall and began skittering along the stone toward me. I froze. My spells were aimed forward, not upward, not sideways. By the time I adjusted, the lead goblin was mid-air, leaping down toward me from above. I panicked. Push. Wrong angle. Burst. Too close. Time slowed. And in that second of fear, I saw something else. The floor. My legs. The direction of my kinetic energy. What if the push wasn't against them? What if it was against me? I turned the spell around. New concept detected. Self-directed kinetic spell. Activated. The blast struck the stone beneath my boots and launched me upward. I flew over the goblin mid-jump. Twisting in the air, I hit the ground hard, stumbled, rolled, then spun and cast wind burst at its back. It slammed into the wall. I blinked, heart hammering. New technique created. Kinetic jump. Spell efficiency, 61%. Custom spell registered. Auto learn active. Minor kinetic push. LV 15-16. Wind burst. LV 7A. The system recognized it. I had invented a spell. No. A technique. Varies. Garen barked. You alive? Yes. I gasped. Then locked that down and watched the rear. I nodded, cast wind burst again, and caught another goblin climbing towards Cell. She gave me a half smile, then slit its throat in one motion. The rest of the fight ended in a blur. Sweat, blood, spells. When it was over, the tunnel was quiet again. I sat down, chest heaving. My arm was sore, my ankle bruised, but I was alive, and something was different. The spells, they weren't tools anymore. They were extensions, choices, mechanics I could alter. Back at the academy, I sat with my notes, scribbling diagrams of my new technique. Kinetic jump, target mana under self, redirect force vertically, control angle for trajectory, combine with wind burst midair for attack or stabilization. This wasn't in the academy books. No one had taught me this. I just figured it out, and the system didn't punish me for it. It rewarded me. Skill development path unlocked. Motion manipulation tier 1. Track active. Self-directed kinetics. Progress 3%. Subpath. That meant skills weren't linear. There were branches. I could go deeper. Specialize. Evolve into something no one else had. A motion-based wind mage. Speed. Mobility. Reaction-based combat. It made sense. And more than that, it felt right. I wasn't the strongest. I didn't have an elemental nuke or a rare bloodline. But I could move. I could think. I could adapt. Later that week, I stood in Professor Elric's strategy class. He paced the floor as we reviewed simulated combat formations. Varies, he said suddenly. Explain the difference between casting to overwhelm and casting to control. Everyone turned. I didn't blink. Overwhelming spells push for raw power, I said. You aim to destroy the enemy faster than they can react. Control-based casting manipulates space, timing, and reactions to create openings. Elric nodded. And which are you? I thought for a moment, then said quietly, neither. I'm trying to be the kind who doesn't need to force a win. Just wait for the right moment. He stopped. Then, surprisingly, gave a faint nod. Interesting answer. He wrote something on his board, then dismissed us. I left the class with a strange warmth in my chest. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself, not to my instructors, and maybe not for long, to the rest of the academy. Because I was starting to figure out how I wanted to fight. And if I kept training this way, they wouldn't be able to ignore me for much longer. They said first-year mages didn't go into the third layer without a squad and an instructor signature. They also said a lot of things that didn't apply when someone didn't care about rules. Her name was Lyra Minette, and I found her bleeding under a collapsed pillar with 2 goblin trackers prowling nearby, unaware she was still breathing. I hadn't meant to go deep. I was supposed to be mapping the second layer alone. Spell practice, mapping routes, marking mana distortions for bonus credit. But the path I took curved where it shouldn't have. And suddenly, I was on layer 3. One step too far. Too quiet. Too close. I'd frozen in place when I heard the sound. Not a monster. A cough. Small. Wet. And then, a voice. "You're not going to scream too, are you?" I turned and found her pinned beneath cracked stone, blood slick along her right arm, mana flickering faintly around her fingertips. Help or leave. But decide fast. Her hair was silver. Not gray. Moonlit silver. Her uniform was cleaner than mine had ever been. And her eyes, though dulled by pain, still held something sharp. I acted before I thought. 2 goblins crept around the debris. I whispered wind burst, angled low, aiming at the stones beside them. The blast struck hard, ricocheting with enough noise to draw their attention. The first one turned. Kinetic push. Mid-air, just as it jumped. It slammed into the cavern wall. The second charged. This one was smarter, ducked under my spell, blade in hand. I waited until the last second, then launched a push from the side. It tripped, rolled, came up snarling. Lyra raised a hand and whispered something I'd never heard before. A pale light bloomed around the goblin's chest, and then it froze, just stopped moving, like a statue wrapped in silk. Then it cracked and crumbled. Unknown spell detected. Type, support/restraint. System analysis. Magical thread construct with stability decay. She slumped back, pale. "Thought you were going to run," she muttered. I dropped to one knee. "I was thinking about it." "You're honest. That's dangerous." I grabbed a stone shard and began prying her free. The weight was awkward, dangerous to lift without hurting her more. She didn't scream, but I could see the pain in her eyes. Her arm was worse than I'd thought. "Compound fracture," she muttered. "And I'm out of bandages." "Wait here," I said. She raised a brow. "Where exactly do you think I'm going?" I flushed, then opened my pack and pulled out my last clean cloth and a flask of diluted mana water. "Hold still. You're not a healer." "No." "Then don't screw it up." I didn't. Not perfectly, but enough. The blood slowed. The cloth held. The light returned to her cheeks. She studied me for a moment. "You're the wind mage," she said. "The one who uses push spells like a dancer who lost the beat." "Thanks, I think. You're better than I expected." She paused, then added, quieter, better than most. We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked a question. "Why were you down here alone?" Her jaw tightened. I asked to be. "Why?" She didn't answer for a long moment. Then, "Because no one takes me seriously unless I bleed for it." I stared at her. This girl, noble born, clearly trained, stronger than she let on, had come to layer 3 alone just to prove something. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "Don't tell anyone I cried." "You didn't." She cracked a smile. "Good." I helped her walk back to the surface. She was light, but the weight of what she carried wasn't. Halfway up the trail, she stopped and said, "Wait." "What?" "Watch this." She raised her good hand. A pale blue light bloomed from her palm. It hovered, condensed, then slipped into her wounded arm like silk pulled through water. New spell detected. Healing class. Minor field knit. Heals minor fractures. Stabilizes tissue. Stops bleeding. Casting time. For 0.3 seconds. Cooldown moderate. Trait detected. Divine thread variant. Noble line encoding. She was healing herself. In the middle of a dungeon. Without a scroll or potion. My mouth hung open. "You're a field healer," I whispered. "You cast mid-combat." She shrugged. "When I have to." "Why hide it?" Her eyes turned cold. "Because nobles don't like when one of their own heals. They want bloodline spent on power, not restoration." Then, after a pause, "And because it makes me a target." I said nothing. Because again, I understood. We reached the surface just before noon. The sunlight stung our eyes, but neither of us looked away. The next day, Lyra sat next to me in class. She didn't ask. She just sat. Professor Elric didn't comment, but he looked at me longer than usual. After class, she turned to me. "We make a good team," she said. "Do we?" "You didn't leave me behind." That's a low bar, but not one most people meet. She stood up and brushed off her coat. Then, without turning back, "Next time I go somewhere stupid, I want you with me." I blinked. "I'll need better armor. I'll teach you how to stitch it." That night, I opened my system. New connection registered. Lyra Minette, support class healer. Bond bonus, plus 3% spell regeneration when in proximity. Status, trust level 1. Skill echo possible. Heal projection, locked. I stared at the entry. Bond bonuses, connection slots. The system had more than just stats. It tracked relationships. And this bond, had already saved my life. Lyra wasn't just a teammate. She was the first person who understood what it meant to fight without recognition. To train not for glory, but for proof. I closed the menu, and for the first time since I awakened, I felt something settle inside me. Not power, not victory, just belonging. The dungeon didn't feel smaller the second time. If anything, it breathed heavier, like it remembered me, like it was waiting. Lyra adjusted the strap of her mana pouch and exhaled slowly beside me. You sure you're ready? No. She grinned. Good. Overconfidence gets people killed. We stood just beyond the second chamber, near the slope that led into the third layer. The others, Garen, Sel, Darren, had cleared it the week prior, but they were off running a new route today. This one was ours. 2-man squad. No backup. Technically unsanctioned. Definitely risky. But we had a goal. The shaman. Rumors had spread fast after last week's scouting reports. A goblin shaman had been spotted coordinating the third layer. That wasn't normal. Goblins didn't use magic. Not unless the dungeon mutated them. And mutated monsters were always worth points. If we could take it down, we'd earn official clearance for intermediate dungeon access. Better gear. Real training dockets. A step closer to the exam. A step closer to Irisville. So we went in. The descent was quieter than last time. My spells were sharper. My nerves steadier. Lyra walked with fluid awareness. Healer or not, she was combat trained. Her senses were sharp. Her posture smooth. Even when she moved, her hands stayed near her belt pouches, ready to cast or throw at a moment's notice. The third chamber was just as we'd left it. Cracked stones, half-cleaned goblin remains, and the faint stench of smoke. We pressed forward. 2 goblins met us in a narrow passage. One raised a rusted axe and howled. The other reached for a horn to alert others. I moved fast. Kinetic push to the horn carrier. Caught his wrist. The blow cracked it against the wall before he could blow. Lyra cast. Threadbind. LV2. Silk-like light wrapped around the axeman's legs. He stumbled, fell. I followed with wind burst to the chest. He didn't get up. Wind burst. LV89. Chain tactic recognized. Thread plus burst. Plus 4% efficiency boost. Temporary. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The shaman's chamber wasn't large. But it was wrong. A greenish fog clung to the floor. The stones were etched with symbols. Crude, but clearly magical. Bones and feathers hung from the ceiling like a child's version of temple. The goblin at the center was taller than the others. Draped in dark cloth. A bone staff in its hand. Its eyes glowed with faint orange light. I took one step forward. It turned to us and hissed, then raised its staff. The dungeon shifted. Mana thickened in the air, sour and dense. The way it swirled made my skin prickle. Hostile spell signature detected. Corrupt miasma. Effect. Mana distortion plus area poison. Resistance required. VIT greater than or equal to 10 or active purge. My VIT was 4. I took one step and nearly buckled. The fog bit into my lungs. My head throbbed. My mana lines felt slippery, like trying to thread a needle underwater. Back, I gasped. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She reached into her pouch and threw a vial to the ground. A soft pulse radiated outward. Minor purification field. LV1. Effect. Negates area poison effects. Low radius. The fog thinned. I could breathe. I can't sustain that for long, she warned. Kill it quick. I nodded. The shaman chanted. Dark green bolts of energy launched forward in an arc slow but wide, covering escape routes. I stepped into them. Kinetic jump. Vertical. Mid-air cast. Wind burst. Aimed at the shaman's staff. The burst clipped it. The spell collapsed early. He screeched. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up fast. Push. Push. Wind burst. He countered. A wall of bone-stitched bark rose in front of him. The burst fizzled. Then vines shot from the ceiling. Lyra raised a hand. Thread sever. LV1. Lines of light sliced upward. The vines crumbled into ash. She stepped forward and pressed a glowing palm to the floor. Sacred Mark. LV1. Bonus effect. Amplifies next ally spell by 20%. Go, she shouted. I cast. Wind burst again, this time reinforced. The air cracked. The bone wall shattered. The shaman turned, raised its staff, and I used push. Not at him. At myself. Side angle. Low to the ground. Redirected trajectory. I hit his flank like a blur and drove my shoulder into his chest. He fell. Before he could scream, Lyra cast again. Threadbind. LV3. The spell wrapped around his limbs. Held tight. He thrashed, once, twice, then froze. His body twitched. And stopped. Goblin Shaman defeated. Mutant class. Tier 1. EXP gained. 430. Aiden Berries. Level up. LV3-4. Trait bonus. +1 free stat point. Mana circuit recognition. +3%. Special reward unlocked. Spell token. Mutation origin. I sat back, panting. My whole body ached. My knuckles were scraped raw, but I wasn't hurt. Not really. And I wasn't alone. Lyra knelt beside the shaman's body. Look, she pulled something from its cloak. A glowing shard, like a fragment of a dungeon core. Spell token. Mutation origin. Use. Unlocks a mutation tier spell slot. Conditions. Mana circuit greater than or equal to 30%. INT greater than or equal to 10. I didn't meet the threshold yet, but soon I would. Lyra stood. Take it. You earned it. She shook her head. You adapted. You struck the kill blow. And I have more spells than I show. I hesitated, then took it. The shard pulsed once, then dimmed. It was warm, real, like potential waiting to bloom. That night, back in the dorm, I sat with the token on my desk. The dungeon had changed something in me. Not just the level up, not just the kill, but the understanding. Fights weren't just about who had the better spell. They were about how you used them, when you moved, who you trusted. Lyra had given me space, and I'd taken a shot. Together, we'd won, and the system had recognized that. Connection strengthened. Lyra Minette, Trust Level 2. Passive bonus upgraded. +6% spell regeneration when near. Bond effect added. Shared cooldown reduction. Minor. I leaned back in my chair, then smiled, faint, tired but honest. This was working. Not perfectly, not quickly, but step by step, I was building something. And tomorrow, we go deeper. I didn't sleep that night, even after the shaman was gone, even after the core fragment dimmed in my hand. I just sat there at the edge of my bed, eyes locked on the system screen, floating quietly in front of me. Level up. LV4. Trait. Efficient allocation system. Milestone reached. Bonus triggered. Custom allocation expansion. You have earned. +3 free stat points. Level up. +2 bonus points. Milestone efficiency tier 1. +1 skill bonus. Select 1. Minor kinetic push. Wind burst. Mana recovery. 6 points. Not the usual 3. This was the first time I saw my trait truly activate. It didn't double everything. It was smarter than that. It scaled based on how I performed, how I used my skills, how well I learned. Skill bonus. I hovered over wind burst. Wind burst bonus. Choose 1. Range extension. +2m. Pressure boost. +15% force. Mana cost reduction. -10%. All tempting. But my mind returned to the fight with the shaman. I hadn't needed more power. I needed to maneuver. I selected range extension, because if I could hit first, I could win. Then I opened the stat menu. Stat allocation. STR, 3. AGI, 7. INT 9. VIT 4. Dex 6. Free points, 5. I thought long and hard. If I boosted INT, my casting strength and mana pool would grow. That meant bigger, cleaner spells. AGI improved movement, reaction, casting speed. My kinetic jump and positioning spells thrived on that. DX made spell precision tighter. Hitting small targets, tighter control, chaining without lag. VIT, I ignored. For now, I put 2 points into INT. That brought me to 11. Enough to meet the mutation token's spell threshold. 1 point into AGI, boosting my movement speed and dodge response. 2 into DX, improving my spell targeting, especially midair. Updated stats. STR, 3. AGI 8. Int 11. Vit 4. Dex 8. Mutation spell slot unlocked. Suggestion: prepare a controlled environment for integration. I exhaled. It felt small, just numbers. But the tension in my chest eased. Every point felt earned. Not dropped from the sky. Not the result of some broken cheat. Just the slow grind of understanding and adaptation. Tomorrow, I will be faster, smarter, more precise. But right now, I needed sleep. The next morning, the training hall hummed with quiet chatter. Students filtered in and out of practice rooms. Duels sparked in the distance. Instructors passed by with arms full of scrolls. Lyra was waiting for me near our usual corridor, arms crossed, hair tied into a tighter braid than usual. "You look taller," she said. "I'm not. You're definitely glowing. Level 4. Level 4.5. She raised a brow. "Show off." I grinned. "Also," I added, pulling the mutation spell token from my pouch, "I'm ready to unlock this." Her eyes widened. "Already. Hit the INT requirement last night." She whistled softly. "You really don't sleep, do you?" "Only after dungeon bosses." We booked a private spell room, the kind used for high-risk spell testing. The floor was etched with mana absorption runes. The walls were insulated stone. A small pedestal sat at the center, waiting for any input crystal or core. I placed a token into it. Spell token. Mutation origin. Activation. Confirm. Warning. Mutation spells are semi-permanent. Confirm? I hesitated. Then tap confirm. The shard glowed. A column of green-blue light rose from the pedestal and bathed my hands. Words scrolled in my vision. Mutation spell options. Tier 1. Cyclone Step. A mid-air directional dash using wind burst acceleration. Short cooldown. Pulse Zone. Cast a small wind barrier that repels ranged attacks and slows enemies. Static Lift. A floating field that allows brief zero-gravity casting, greatly improving control. My heart pounded. Each spell was custom, personal, and all of them played into my style. I narrowed my focus on Cyclone Step. It was short range, directional, low cooldown, used kinetic redirection combined with wind thrust. Perfect for chaining movement, dodging, repositioning mid-air. Exactly the kind of style I'd been developing. I chose it, and the spell entered my system. Mutation spell acquired. Cyclone Step, LV1. Cooldown, 7 seconds. Speed scaling, AGI INT. Bonus perks, auto-stabilize on landing. Reduced cast delay. Note, this spell may evolve based on spell synergy. I immediately felt it. A new circuit, a new line of mana in my chest. It hummed, waiting to be used. I stepped to the center of the room, focused, and cast. Wind surged around me. Tight, not loud. And I launched leftward with a sudden crack of compressed air. I caught my landing with a low roll and came up smiling. Lyra clapped once. "Show off," she said again. But she was smiling too. Later that day, I saw something I hadn't expected. Riven Salis, the Academy's top-ranked first year, was in the practice hall. He was surrounded by a few highborns, casually dismantling an advanced fire shield with a spell chain I didn't even recognize. It wasn't just power. It was surgical. His eyes were cold, focused, calculating. And then he looked at me, just for a second, then turned away. But the message was clear. "I see you now." And somehow, that meant more than applause. I wasn't top-ranked. I wasn't even close. But I was on the map. And I had new spells, new stats, new strategies. This journey had only just begun. And I'd already learned something vital. You don't need to start strong. You just need to get smarter. The spell chain hall was quiet. Too quiet. Even though half a dozen students stood along the outer rim, even though instructors paced with clipboards and crystal quills, there was a tension in the air that felt personal, like the floor itself was judging you. Professor Varen's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Chain casting is not speed casting," she said. "It is not about showing off. It is about stability, synergy, and structure. Anyone can throw 2 spells in a row. Only a real mage can make them speak to each other." She turned. "Varys, you're up." I swallowed once and stepped forward. The center of the room was marked with 5 floating runes, hovering crystal sigils that pulsed with soft mana. My goal: cast a continuous chain of spells that touched all 5 without shattering them. Each student got 3 chances. Most failed by the second rune. I took a breath and closed my eyes. My system flickered softly in the corner. Cyclone step, ready. Kinetic push, stable. Wind burst, synced, plus 6%. Chain suggestions. Cyclone, burst, push, burst, wide, cyclone. I opened with cyclone step. A quick dash forward, low and curved, angling around the first rune. Wind burst followed, not for force, but for angle. I curved it around the second rune, like bending a stream of air through a tunnel. I tapped the third with kinetic push, light and low, just enough pressure. Fourth rune, overshot it. Too fast. I felt the mana curve break. The fifth rune flickered. My push spell backfired slightly, hitting the wrong trajectory. A light ping echoed through the room. Chain break at rune 4, Professor Varen said. Mana curve too steep. Again. I reset. Hands cold. Focused harder. Second attempt. Chain 2 broke. I'd cast 2 quickly after Cyclone Step. The wind hadn't settled. Final attempt. This time I slowed down. Not my body, my mana. I felt the threads. The pulls from my core. How each spell left behind a wake. And how that wake pulled on the next one. New insight. Mana wake recognition. Passive acquired. Casting adjusted. Plus 5% stability. On-chain spell cast within 1.4 seconds of movement-based spell. I moved. Cast. Stepped. Float. 1, 2, 3, 4. Final rune. Wind burst. Compressed. Focused. The rune shivered, but held. All 5 lit up. Chain completed grade. B+. Skill progress. Wind burst. LV10. Evolution available. Trait triggered. Bonus allocation +1. The room exhaled. Professor Varen nodded, not smiling, but clearly satisfied. That, she said, was closer to what a spell chain should be. I stepped back, heart thudding. But as the adrenaline faded, something else set in. A flicker, a skip of my pulse. Not physical, magical. When I sat down, my fingers twitched with leftover mana strain. That night, in my dorm, I cast again alone. Cyclone step, wind burst, push, something skipped. The third spell staggered. Mana twisted instead of flowed. My hands trembled. Warning, core instability detected. Overcast fatigue, threshold reached. Recommendation, enter mana calibration state or delay advanced chains. I stared at the screen. What was calibration? I summoned the help window. Mana calibration state, a meditation protocol that aligns internal circuits. Reduces casting errors. Optional, but required for optimal long-term growth. Warning, rapid skill growth increases circuit distortion without calibration. So this was the cost. My trait let me grow fast, but I hadn't been adjusting with it. The magic was outpacing my body. If I pushed further without aligning, I might lose more than just control. I might damage my circuits, which meant I had to slow down. The next day, instead of another dungeon run, I went to the old practice shed, sat cross-legged in the center, and began to breathe. No casting, no movement, just internal alignment. I visualized my mana core, saw the spell paths I'd formed, jagged, overlapping, chaotic. No wonder I was staggering. Wind burst was colliding with push. Cyclone was overriding the same flow paths as step. I began separating them, one by one, letting them rest in different grooves. Entering calibration state. Thread tension lowering. Projected duration, 48 minutes. Bonus, core alignment +2%. Chain casting stability +3%. The time passed quietly. By the end, my limbs tingled. My casting hand felt lighter. My vision clearer. I stood up. Whispered wind burst. The air flowed perfectly. Then cyclone step. No skip. No jolt. Just glide. All spells synced. Mana efficiency upgraded. Tier 1. Passive gained. Flow adaptation. Improves cast order smoothing. I smiled. It wasn't power. It was harmony. I was learning how to move with magic. Not ahead of it. That night, Lyra found me sketching spell lines into a notebook under the campus lamplight. She didn't say anything for a long while. Then, "You're glowing again." I smirked. Stat bonus. She sat beside me and leaned over my notes. "You're calibrating paths?" "Trying to." My system started warning me. She tilted her head. You know, most first years don't discover way conflict until year 2. Yeah, but I learned fast. She looked at me, not just amused, but curious, like she was seeing something. You're not just trying to pass the exam, are you? I looked at her, then shook my head. No, I said. I want to win it. She grinned. Good, she said, because I don't plan on losing either. The dueling hall was crowded that afternoon, not just with first years. Upperclassmen lined the stone balcony overlooking the arena. Even a few instructors stood at the edges. Word had spread fast. The wind mage who jumped levels and built his own movement spell. They came expecting a spectacle. I came to finish something. Leon Graves stood at the center ring already. He hadn't changed much. Broad shoulders, flame-marked gloves. That same cocky smirk etched into his face like it had never been challenged. "Varies," he called out, voice projecting clearly. "I've been waiting." I stepped onto the platform without answering. He didn't deserve my words. Not yet. Professor Elric stood between us, arms folded. "This is an official match under observation," he said calmly. "No life-threatening spells. No outside help. Duel ends when one party yields or is incapacitated." He looked at me. "Ready?" I nodded. Then at Leon. "Always." Elric stepped back. "Begin." Leon moved first. Of course he did. He always moved first. Flame burst from his palms in twin arcs, sweeping wide like wings. I sidestepped, cast Cyclone Step, and dashed backward in a low arc, wind lifting me just above the ground. His flame missed by inches. The crowd murmured. He grinned, still running. "No," I said, "just repositioning." I launched wind burst low, not at him, but at the floor behind him. The pressure struck the stone, and a wave of dust billowed up, momentarily obscuring vision. He cast through it, blindly. Good, that was what I wanted. His fire shot wide. I cast kinetic push of the dust cloud. Compact, horizontal, fast. The burst carried the smoke directly into his face. He choked, stepped back. I dashed in. Burst, step, push. A threefold rhythm he'd never seen. He staggered, but then, "Flame shield," he shouted. A dome of fire erupted around him, just as my second burst connected. The pressure slammed into the shield, but it held. Barely. He emerged with a wild grin. "Nice tricks, but shields don't care about wind." I didn't answer. Instead, I circled, kept moving, because I wasn't trying to overpower his shield. I was waiting for the breaks between his spells. I saw it during his next cast. A wide flame spiral meant to lock me down. His left foot shifted early. Shoulders followed half a second later. Telegraph. That's when I struck. Cyclone step to the right, angle sharp, and pushed to lift a loose tile from the floor. I launched it like a projectile. He flinched. The flame spiral tilted just enough for me to roll under it. I emerged inside his radius. He panicked. That was new. I cast Wind Burst, point blank. The shield cracked. "Enough," he shouted, throwing up both hands. Fire detonated outward in a ring. Too fast to dodge. I cast Kinetic Jump, down and backward, redirecting the blast force. It scorched over me, but didn't land clean. I hit the ground hard, rolled, coughed. Vision blurred for a second. My mana was low, but his was lower. He panted now, sweat on his brow. I stood. Both of us scorched. Both of us raw, but I was still moving. He wasn't. "Your spells are loud," I said quietly, "but you're always a half second behind their path." He blinked. "What?" "You cast wide. Overwhelming. But you never read the field. You don't adapt." I raised one hand. Wind pulsed softly around me. "I do." I launched a wind burst toward his left. He dodged. I followed it instantly with push, aiming at his feet. He slipped, hit the stone. I was over him before he could get up. Not casting, just standing there. He stared up at me, chest heaving, then looked away. I yield. Duel complete. Winner. Aiden varies. Recognition gained. +12. Trait activated. Strategic efficiency path unlocked. Bonus. +1 INT. +1 DEX. New title gained. Tactician. Bronze tier. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone clapped. Then a few more. I stepped back and helped him up. To his credit, he took my hand. Didn't meet my eyes, but took it. He walked off without another word. I stayed in the center of the ring, breathing, alive, unbroken. Not because I hit harder, but because I read him, and read myself. Afterward, Professor Elric approached me quietly. "That was not just a duel," he said. "That was a study in control." "Thank you," I said softly. He handed me a folded paper. "Optional combat analytics session next week. Top-tier students only." I opened it. Advanced feedback on circuit layering, tactical spell routes, mental resistance drills. I looked up. "I'm invited." "You earned it." That night, I sat with Lyra under the library lanterns. She watched the whole duel, said nothing until the moon was high. "You moved like you'd already seen the fight before it started," she said, "because I thought about it every night since the last one." She smiled faintly. "People are going to start following you." "I don't want followers," I muttered. "No," she said, "but you're going to get them anyway." I stared up at the sky, quiet, still, then looked at my hand, the same one that cast wind, pushed earth, cut through flame. It didn't feel like a weapon, just a reminder of what I was trying to become. Not powerful, not feared, just capable, enough to stand where others fall, and soon, strong enough to pass the exam, not by force, but by will and rhythm. There was no applause when I entered the tactics room, no audience, no arena, just a cold floor, 6 chairs, and one man waiting at the center with a teacup in hand. Professor Elric. Everyone at the academy whispered about him. The war saint of the South, former dueling champion, strategic advisor to the capital's arcane corps, and now, the quietest instructor in the school. He rarely praised, he never repeated himself, and no one really knew what he was watching. But today, I knew he was watching me. "Varies," he said without looking up. "Take the second seat." I obeyed. 5 other students trickled in behind me. Older, taller, better equipped. Their uniforms bore stripes for elemental mastery, award from previous years. And here I was, the wind mage who had used a floor tile to win a duel. Elric sipped his tea. Then, without preamble, "You're all here because you're not idiots." One of the older students raised a brow. Elric ignored him. "You've demonstrated strategic potential, not just in battle, but in thought. And in this academy, that matters more than you realize." He stood, setting his teacup down. In war, raw power breaks gates, but strategy wins sieges. And strategy starts with reading the board. He turned to the crystal wall behind him and tapped it once. An illusion sparked to life, frozen mid-motion. A group of students locked in simulated combat. A swordsman with a shield, a rogue flanking, and a mage hurling fire. They were about to lose. "Varies," Elric said. I stiffened. "What's their mistake?" I stood and studied the illusion. They were fighting a horned beast, fast, armored, low to the ground. Its arc of attack was wide. "The shield is holding the wrong angle," I said. "He's bracing for frontal impact, but the beast's momentum is rotational. He'll get thrown off balance." Elric's expression didn't change. "Continue. The mage is casting wide area fire, but in a cave setting, that's mana waste. Heat rebalance. They need a pressure point burst. And the rogue? She's too close. She'll get clipped when the beast sweeps. Solution: use the mage as bait. Force the beast to rush. Shield redirects from a lateral brace. Rogue strikes from elevation. It's about rhythm, not pressure." Elric nodded once, then dismissed the illusion. "Good. Sit." I did. The others were watching me differently now. I hated that part. After the session, Elric stopped me just outside the chamber. His voice was quiet, measured. "You're different," he said. I didn't know how to answer that. "You don't cast to overpower. You cast to survive. That's rarer than you think." He walked slowly, hand behind his back. "Tell me, Aiden, what do you want from this academy?" It was the first time he'd used my first name. I paused, then said honestly, "I want to pass the exam. Not barely, not out of pity. I want to pass it with no room left for doubt." Elric studied me. "Ambition," he said softly, "but clean. You're not drunk on it yet." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. Inside is a passcode. It unlocks a sealed section of the arcane library. Only instructors and combat mentors are allowed in. Don't share it. He handed it to me. I took it with both hands. "There's theory in there," he continued. "On-chain casting, mana harmonics, and something you may appreciate, field memory threads." I blinked. "What are those?" "A lost technique," he said. "They let you anchor spell flow to an environment. Cast once, echo twice." I stared. "You think I'm ready for that?" "No," he said. But you will be. And I'd rather you get there before someone else drags you into a fight you're not prepared for. He started to walk away, then stopped. You're not from here, are you? Village boy, I said. From the outer marsh. No bloodline. No noble crest. He nodded. Then I'll give you the truth most students never hear. I held my breath. This academy doesn't care where you come from, but the world beyond it does. If you want a place at the top, you don't need to be loud, but you do need to be seen. Make them watch. Then he left. Just like that. No smile. No praise. Just the door. And the first key I'd ever been handed by someone who didn't doubt me. That night, I entered the arcane library through the sealed door. It was quiet, dustier, less polished. No students. Just scrolls, maps, old diagrams, and one terminal connected to spell simulations. I spent the next 2 hours there, learning, not casting, reading about mana retention curves, spell layering theory, field echoes, things that made my head spin, things no one else my level even knew existed. My system pulsed faintly. Passive acquired, theorist's edge, basic. Your spell evolution potential increases based on understanding of underlying mechanics. Bonus, plus 4% evolution speed when combining theory and field use. I smiled, then leaned deeper into the notes. Tomorrow, I test what I learned, not just in battle, but in how I thought, how I moved, because I was starting to realize power wasn't just about spells, it was about knowledge, and I was finally being given the tools to earn it. The entrance looked harmless. That should have been the first warning. Just a narrow tunnel framed by pale stone, the air cool and still. But the moment we crossed the threshold, the smell hit. A thick, chemical sting, like melted iron and rotting fruit. Lyra covered her nose instantly. Ugh, that's new. Acid, I said softly. Low-grade mist. Not lethal, but constant. I could feel it already. A tingling on my arms. My boots were already showing signs of wear. I tapped my system. Dungeon. Slime caverns. Rank D. Environmental modifier. Acidic fog. Constant armor decay. Slow mana contamination. Caution. Spell stability reduced in mist-heavy zones. Reduced stability? That was going to be a problem. My whole style relied on control and flow. Precision casting. Mist meant diffusion. Mana spread wider. Lost faster. Wind wouldn't behave the same. Lyra looked over at me. You good? I nodded. Just recalculating. Because you're already trying to reinvent your spell angles, aren't you? I gave her a side glance. You're not wrong. She grinned and pulled a vial from her pouch. Armor salve. Coat your boots, or they'll rot in an hour. I applied it quickly. We pressed inward. The first chamber opened wide, a cavern with jagged ridges along the ceiling, mossy puddles across the floor. No noise. No signs of life. I stepped forward cautiously, then heard the drip. It wasn't water. It was slime. Above us. 3 globs dropped fast. Thick, translucent creatures with cores buried deep in their centers. They hit the ground and split. One rolled toward me with surprising speed. Wind burst. The air curved, but not cleanly. The mist swallowed the edges of the spell, diffusing the pressure. The slime jiggled, slowed slightly, but didn't stop. Wind's too light. I shouted. Lyra cast instantly. Threadbind. LV3. The spell hit one slime, but it didn't wrap. The creature absorbed it, threads sinking into the gel like needles in syrup. She blinked. That's new. I swapped spells. Kinetic push. Low, compact. It struck the slime near me from below and launched it backward into a ridge. It splattered, briefly, but then reformed. I stepped back. They're tanking everything. Acid resistant. Threat immune. Lyra muttered. What do they not resist? I looked again, focused hard. The cores. Inside the slime bodies, glowing faintly, drifting with every movement. Wait, look. They have cores. So, we don't attack the slime. We reposition the core. She blinked once, then grinned. That's smart. I dashed forward, cast push sideways, but aimed through the slime, directing the kinetic force at the core itself. The impact wasn't clean, but the core shifted, sank low, close to the ground. Then I cast Cyclone Step, leaping past it, and on the way down, another push. Core cracked. The slime twitched, then collapsed. Slime, core strike, defeated, bonus, Strategic kill. Skill XP gained. Minor kinetic push plus wind burst. Trait efficiency triggered. +1 free stat point. Tactical use. The second slime lunged at Lyra. She rolled backward, threw a crystal at her feet. Burst light sigil. Custom trigger. Flash damage to transparent enemies. The light exploded. The slime's outer membrane recoiled. Then she followed with a physical strike, a dagger jab directly at the core, now visible. Clean hit. We stood breathing hard. The mist had thickened. Every spell felt twice as slow. Every move risked gear corrosion. But we'd figured it out. We weren't winning with force. We were winning with understanding. We pushed deeper. Room after room. Slime variants. Mucus-covered pressure traps. Slippery stones. Lyra's heal spells began to falter from mana pollution. My wind spells lost structure in open chambers. So we adapted. I started casting compressed wind burst and micropulses, short-range detonations that moved mist out of the air before my real cast landed. I called it air shear. New custom technique. Air shear, wind burst, split cast. Effect: clears mana-dense air for 2 seconds. Bonus: +8% spell stability on following cast. Trait recognition. Skill refinement path activated. Lyra adjusted her heels, too. She anchored them to solid ground contact, like pouring liquid light through her feet. I call it root weaving, she said. Sounds like a bard invented it. I'll take that as a compliment. Eventually, we reached the final chamber. The mist was thickest here and alive. It pulsed, swirled, then parted. A massive slime dropped from the ceiling, 5 times the size of the others, with 3 rotating cores drifting inside like moons around a center. Lyra swore. We're in trouble. No, I said. We're in training. She shot me a look. You're really enjoying this, aren't you? Absolutely terrified, I said. But yes. The fight began. The slime pulsed, launched acidic tendrils across the chamber. We split left and right. I cast air shear, then a wind burst at the far left core. It veered, barely moved. Too deep. Lyra ducked under a tendril and began running in a circle. She shouted, "Force it to rotate. Spin the whole thing." I grinned. Smart. I began casting short bursts around the edges of the slime's body, deliberately pushing it into motion. It started to roll, slowly, rhythmically. Now the cores moved with predictable timing. Lyra struck the first. Then I leapt and hit the second mid-rotation with kinetic jump, angled perfectly into a burst as I landed. It cracked. The slime screeched, shuddered. Final core. I dashed forward. Time slowed. The mist pulled at my limbs. My mana felt heavy. One last spell. Wind burst. Point blank. Clean and fast. The core shattered. The slime collapsed into a pile of bubbling residue. Dungeon clear. Slime caverns tier D complete. Experience gained. Plus 520. Trait triggered. Spell technique milestone achieved. Bonus unlocked. Skill branch choice available. Choose evolution path. Burst mastery. Reflex plus power. Motion weaving. Control plus flow. I didn't choose right away. I just sat down next to Lyra, who flopped beside me, laughing through coughs. "I hate slimes," she said. "You just hate being covered in acidic pudding." True. I stared up at the pulsing cavern ceiling. Everything hurt. My hands, my knees, even my magic. But inside me, something was settling. Something calm. A knowledge that I wasn't just fighting anymore. I was crafting. Each fight was a forge. And the mage I wanted to become was slowly, stubbornly taking shape. I never liked shields. Even when the instructor showed off flashy barrier spells or dome wards, they always seemed wrong for me. Heavy, fixed, reactive in the worst way. I wasn't a wall. I was motion, which meant if I wanted protection, they had to move with me. The slime caverns had made that painfully clear. Static defenses broke, armor melted, and any spell that took more than 2 seconds to cast was a liability. So I sat in the training shed, chalk in one hand, mana thread glowing in the other, and started sketching a spell no one had taught me. Not a shield, not a coat, but a current. A layer of wind magic that flowed across my body like a second skin. Light, responsive, pressure sensitive. New spell concept. Wind armor, draft status. 68% theoretical viability. Effect. redirects minor kinetic force, enhances AGI reaction by +4%, absorbs 1 to 2 low-level physical hits. Trait match, high, motion weaving, 81% compatibility. My system pulsed, encouraging the work. I like that. It didn't give me spells. It let me design them. The next 2 days blurred into repetition. Spell theory in the morning. Mobility drills in the afternoon. Crafting sessions with Lyra in the evening. I'd begun testing the wind armor shell by coating small surfaces, gloves, boots, watching how the air responded when I moved. At first it fluttered, then began to pulse. I stood in the middle of the practice shed and cast. The air rippled outward. Not loud, not dramatic, but it wrapped around my arms, shoulders, legs, a barely visible shimmer, like vapor following my movements. I took a slow step. The shimmer followed. Then I lunged forward, mimicking a real fight dash. The shimmer flared and pulled ahead, like a buffer predicting where I'd go. I grinned. It was working. Wind armor. LV1 acquired. Type: passive-active hybrid. AGI sync. 6%. Effect: redirects 10% of glancing melee damage. Increases movement spell efficiency +3%. I tested it immediately. Cyclone step into push short burst toward a target dummy. When I landed, I kept moving. For the first time, there was no shock lag. The wind spell carried me, buffered the motion so that I didn't stumble. It felt like skating on wind. The second test was riskier. I stood still and let Garen punch me. Just once. Are you insane? He asked. Just do it. He swung. I braced. The impact hit hard, but the wind armor flared. Not enough to stop the blow, but it redirected his fist, angling it off my shoulder instead of dead center on my chest. I slid a foot back, caught my balance, and looked up, heart racing. That would have bruised a rib, I said. Garen shook his hand. Still might have. But he was smiling. You just made armor for cowards, he said. Armor for thinkers, I corrected. That night, I opened my system. A new tab had appeared. Combat feedback loop detected. Reflex reading mode unlocked. Effect: tracks incoming attack patterns. Allows partial prediction based on AGI and spell affinity. Warning: high strain on focus. Not recommended for prolonged use at current level. It was more than I expected. The system wasn't just helping me cast. It was learning with me. Tracking angles, pressure, how I dodged, how I fought. I activated reflex reading for the first time. A new visual overlay appeared at the edge of my sight. Lines, projections, like ghost trails of where attacks would go if I didn't move. They weren't perfect, just faint suggestions. But in a duel, suggestions could be the difference between bruises and a win. I felt a chill. This wasn't just growth anymore. It was evolution. In the following days, I took wind armor into every fight simulation. Not all of them went well. Against fast strikers, the spell couldn't fully redirect damage. Against blunt force, it staggered. But when it worked, it was like dancing between blows. A quarter turn here, a sidestep there. The wind would take the edge off, guide my foot just right. And every time I used it, it learned. Wind armor, LV1, LV3. Reaction sync, 12%. Trait efficiency bonus applied, +1 AGI. Even Professor Vera noticed. She watched from her seat during class sparring sessions, scribbling notes but saying nothing. Until, one day, she asked in front of everyone, Varys, are you aware that wind armor isn't in the standard curriculum? I paused. Yes. She nodded. And you wrote it yourself? With a bit of theory assist, I admitted. And reflex reading. System picked it up. She smiled faintly. Not praise, but not disapproval either. Don't stop, she said. Just don't forget. Prediction can become a crutch. And a crutch, when kicked, becomes a trap. I nodded slowly. Lesson received. That night, Lyra and I sat by the lake near the training fields. The wind was soft, the moon light, the stars reflecting off the rippling water. You're becoming something weird, she said. Thanks. No. I mean it, she said, voice quieter. Most mages pick a spell and master it. You're building an ecosystem. Something reactive. Alive. I didn't answer right away. Then, because I don't want to fight the way they expect me to. She tilted her head. I don't want to win because I had the better element. I continued. Or because I got lucky with a bloodline. I want to win because I understood what the fight needed. And gave it. She looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "You're going to change a lot of things." I smiled. "Only if I live long enough." She rolled her eyes, but she didn't disagree. Wind armor wasn't flashy. It didn't explode, didn't burn or blind, but it moved with me, protected me in silence, and whispered one simple truth with every step. You don't have to be stronger if you're always in the right place. The tournament brackets went up at dawn. By noon, whispers were already flying across campus. Varys and Manette, they actually paired those two. They're strong, but come on. One wind rat and a girl who wastes her crest on healing. They're up against Royce and Moraine. That's a stomp. Lyra and I stood beneath the bracket board, eyes scanning the glowing names etched in floating manuscript. Her arms were crossed, but her fingers twitched the way they always did when she was thinking too hard. Royce uses lightning, she murmured. Direct control, wide arcs, defensive follow-ups. Moraine's a field bender, I added. She specializes in illusion pockets and light warping, one of the few in our year. Lyra sighed. So basically, we get fried or confused, or both. We won't, I said. Not if we treat the field like a third teammate. She glanced at me. You've been reading too many tactical scrolls again. Correct. The arena was a wide circle of cracked stone, with mana lines running beneath the surface like glowing veins. It was the Academy's top practice zone, enhanced with magical wards to simulate terrain changes. When we stepped in, the field shimmered. Suddenly, we stood in a dense forest illusion. Tall grass, low mist, scattered rocks. Royce and Moraine waded across the glade, dressed in polished gear. Royce spun his spear once, lightning crackling faintly along its shaft. You sure you're in the right bracket, Wind Boy? Moraine didn't speak, just lowered her hood and smiled. Professor Elric stood at the edge, raising his hand. Begin. We split immediately. Lyra vanished behind a low ridge to the right. I burst left with Cyclone Step, kicking Wind into a curve sprint. Royce reacted instantly. Lightning snapped from his spear and chased the moving arm. I threw up wind armor just in time. The current redirected the bolt around my shoulder, scorching my sleeve, but not my skin. I skidded behind a tree, cast push on the roots to hurl dirt in the air, and followed with a wind burst aimed high to scatter Moraine's illusions. For a moment, the fog wavered. I saw her, and then the image vanished again. Royce appeared in front of me, spear sweeping low. I ducked. Reflex reading flashed in my mind. His foot shifted right. Strike coming from the left. I spun and cast kinetic push at the ground to launch myself backward. He missed by an inch. You're annoying, he growled. Thanks, I muttered, landing hard. He charged again, but this time I wasn't trying to win. I was stalling, because Lyra was moving into position. I heard the sound, thread spells humming quietly near the edge of the arena. She was setting a trap, not for Royce, but for his partner. Moraine had to expose herself to support him. She used light distortion, not raw defense. Royce lunged again. I sidestepped, barely staying ahead of his reach, wind armor buffering glancing blows. Every strike I dodged built a pattern. Each movement pushed him closer to Lyra's radius. I made sure of it. One last Cyclone Step curved me around a boulder. Royce followed and entered the zone. That's when Lyra cast. Thread Pulse, custom field variant, activated. Hidden threads triggered around the stone, glowing with mana tags. The moment Royce stepped through, they wrapped around his boots like anchors. He froze, eyes wide. Moraine's illusion shimmered, panic flickering in her control, and Lyra stepped out from behind the ridge. Her hands were glowing. Not soft, not subtle, radiant. New spell activated. Heal Burst, Tier 1 mutation. Effect: area-wide healing shockwave that cleanses debuffs and restores vitality based on caster stability. Bonus trait: heals partner first. The light detonated from her chest outward, blinding, fast, and centered on me. The heat I hadn't noticed in my bones, gone. The mana strain clinging to my arms, cleansed. The ache in my back from dodging lightning, washed away in an instant. I stood tall, full strength, full speed. Royce's eyes widened. You're not supposed to be able to. I dashed forward. Push step burst. 3-move combo. No hesitation. His armor cracked. He stumbled. I hit him again, this time with a downward push that flattened him to the arena floor. Royce incapacitated. Target removed from match. I spun toward Moraine. She tried to vanish again, but her illusion was flickering. Too much light. Lyra's heel burst had disrupted the ambient field. Moraine cursed. Lyra walked toward her slowly, palms glowing. Your trick only works in shadow, she said. Stay back, Moraine hissed, casting a half-formed flare. It went wide. She'd never fought a healer before. Not one who advanced. Not one who fought to protect. Lyra cast one more time. Thread cage. And the match was over. Team victory, Varys and Minette. Ranking advanced. Tournament round 1 cleared. Skill insight unlocked. Heal burst. Tier 1. May now evolve. Bond strength increased. Plus shared cooldown 2's reduction. Party bonus. After the match, the crowd didn't cheer. They stared. Not at me. At her. Whispers followed us all the way out of the arena. Was that a Tier 1 heal mutation? She cast a burst. Mid-fight. How? Isn't she supposed to be a support only? Lyra walked beside me. Face calm. Eyes unreadable. I guess I wasn't subtle, she said. You were incredible, I replied. She glanced at me. Do you think people saw me this time? They'll never look away again. She smiled, small but real. And I knew something had changed. Not just in the way the school saw us, but in how we saw ourselves. We weren't just filling roles anymore. We were rewriting them. The duel hall was supposed to be empty. Our match had ended 20 minutes ago, and most students had already filtered out, talking about Lyra's heel burst or speculating on who we'd face next. But I stayed behind. I often did after matches, not to soak in the silence, but to study the patterns. Where the ground cracked, where the illusions bent. Every fight left behind a rhythm if you look closely enough. Today, though, something else stayed behind, too. I felt it before I saw it. A sharp presence, like walking into a room and knowing someone dangerous had just left, except this person was still here. A figure walked through the far gate. Tall, black uniform, high-collared coat, gloves, pristine white, a spell book at his hip, not strapped in, just resting like it wouldn't dare fall. Riven Salas, top-ranked first year, rumored to be stronger than some third years. He didn't glance at me as he walked toward the center of the arena. Behind him trailed a student I vaguely recognized. Elin Vassal, a second year. Fire user. Talented. Loud. Too confident. Really, Elin said, laughing. You came yourself just to spar? I expected a cold letter or a stand-in. You talk too much, Riven said softly. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room. Elin snorted and stepped onto the platform. I'm going to enjoy knocking the royal frost out of you. Riven didn't reply, just stepped into place. No referee, no ceremony. The match simply began. It lasted 22 seconds. Elin launched forward, fire erupting from both palms. Riven didn't move. He raised one hand and cast a sigil midair. Not a shield, not a burst. It was a mirror. The fire hit it and vanished. Not reflected, absorbed. Before Elin could react, Riven snapped his fingers once. A sigil formed behind Elin's back. Same spell, same fire, reversed. Spell, refraction sigil, absorbs energy and reverses elemental flow. Classification, advanced arcane geometry. Elin took his own flame full force to the spine. Crumbled. The crowd, which had begun to gather at the edges, fell silent. Riven turned, made direct eye contact with me. His eyes were gray, not empty, not angry, just observing. He walked past me like I was part of the architecture, then paused, only slightly. You're the wind mage, he said. I turned, heart already tightening. Yes, the one who rewrote your own defense spell. I did. He looked at me, not with disdain, not with respect, either. Just calculation. You learned fast. I try. You'll need to learn faster. Then he walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. His voice stayed in my head. That spell, that mirror, the precision with which he crushed someone older and stronger. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly, but I was shaken, because what I saw in Riven wasn't brute force. It was design, calculated casting, precision control, spell layering on a level I'd only begun to study, the kind of magic I wanted to master. I opened my system, staring at my own stats. Int, 11, AGI 9, Dex 9, Trait, efficient allocation system, known techniques, wind armor, cyclone step, air shear, reflex reading. I was proud of all of them. But tonight, they felt incomplete. Not broken, just untested. Tomorrow, I would ask Professor Elric about arcane geometry, about refraction spells, about the logic behind inversion techniques. Because if Riven was the ceiling, I wanted to start building the staircase. The next morning, Lyra found me in the library with 6 books open around me and ink stains on both sleeves. She didn't say anything at first. Then softly, "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. She sat beside me. "He's strong," she said. "I know. And smart." "I know." She leaned in. "So what are you going to do?" I looked at the open scroll in front of me, an old thesis on echo patterns and mid-cast sigils. Then at the sparring notes I'd drawn for myself. I closed the scroll gently and said, "I'm going to learn faster." She smiled. Good. Because deep down we both knew it. Riven wasn't just an opponent. He was a reminder of how far we still had to go and how much further we could reach. The duel hall was supposed to be empty. Our match had ended 20 minutes ago, and most students had already filtered out, talking about Lyra's heel burst or speculating on who we'd face next. But I stayed behind. I often did after matches, not to soak in the silence, but to study the patterns, where the ground cracked, where the illusions bent. Every fight left behind a rhythm if you look closely enough. Today, though, something else stayed behind, too. I felt it before I saw it. A sharp presence, like walking into a room and knowing someone dangerous had just left, except this person was still here. A figure walked through the far gate. Tall, black uniform, high-collared coat, gloves, pristine white, a spellbook at his hip, not strapped in, just resting like it wouldn't dare fall. Riven Salis, top-ranked first year, rumored to be stronger than some third years. He didn't glance at me as he walked toward the center of the arena. Behind him trailed a student I vaguely recognized. Elin Vassal, a second year. Fire user. Talented. Loud. Too confident. Really, Elin said, laughing. "You came yourself just to spar?" I expected a cold letter or a stand-in. "You talk too much," Riven said softly. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room. Elin snorted and stepped onto the platform. "I'm going to enjoy knocking the royal frost out of you." Riven didn't reply, just stepped into place. No referee, no ceremony. The match simply began. It lasted 22 seconds. Elin launched forward, fire erupting from both palms. Riven didn't move. He raised one hand and cast a sigil mid-air. Not a shield, not a burst. It was a mirror. The fire hit it and vanished. Not reflected, absorbed. Before Elin could react, Riven snapped his fingers once. A sigil formed behind Elin's back. Same spell, same fire. Reversed. Spell, refraction sigil. Absorbs energy and reverses elemental flow. Classification, advanced arcane geometry. Elin took his own flame full force to the spine. Crumbled. The crowd, which had begun to gather at the edges, fell silent. Riven turned, made direct eye contact with me. His eyes were gray. Not empty, not angry, just observing. He walked past me like I was part of the architecture, then paused, only slightly. "You're the wind, Mage," he said. I turned, heart already tightening. "Yes, the one who rewrote your own defense spell." I did. He looked at me, not with disdain, not with respect, either. Just calculation. "You learn fast." "I try. You'll need to learn faster." Then he walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. His voice stayed in my head. That spell, that mirror, the precision with which he crushed someone older and stronger. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly, but I was shaken, because what I saw in Riven wasn't brute force. It was design, calculated casting, precision control, spell layering on a level I'd only begun to study. The kind of magic I wanted to master. I opened my system, staring at my own stats. Int, 11. AGI 9. Dex 9. Trait, efficient allocation system. Known techniques. Wind armor. Cyclone step. Air shear. Reflex reading. I was proud of all of them. But tonight, they felt incomplete. Not broken, just untested. Tomorrow, I would ask Professor Elric about arcane geometry, about refraction spells, about the logic behind inversion techniques. Because if Riven was the ceiling, I wanted to start building the staircase. The next morning, Lyra found me in the library with 6 books open around me and ink stains on both sleeves. She didn't say anything at first. Then softly, "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. She sat beside me. "He's strong," she said. "I know. And smart." "I know." She leaned in. "So what are you going to do?" I looked at the open scroll in front of me, an old thesis on echo patterns and mid-cast sigils. Then, at the sparring notes I'd drawn for myself, I closed the scroll gently and said, "I'm going to learn faster." She smiled. Good, because deep down we both knew it. Riven wasn't just an opponent. He was a reminder of how far we still had to go and how much further we could reach. The match was scheduled without warning. No poster, no ceremony, just a quiet message in my system inbox. "You've been entered in a public duel by Instructor Elric. Opponent, Riven Salis. Location, Hall of Spires, Tier 1 Simulation Arena. Time noon." Lyra read it over my shoulder. Her breath caught. "Are you ready?" "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." The Hall of Spires was nothing like the other dueling arenas. It wasn't open air. It wasn't stone and chalk. It was layered illusion, an immersive battlefield rendered by 5 linked dungeon cores and regulated by the Academy's Arcana Council. When we stepped in, the environment flickered into a shattered floating platform, fragments of land hovering over a sea of clouds, each chunk bound together by strands of light. I stood on one edge. Riven stood on the other. Above us, instructors and upperclassmen watched from suspended balconies. Even Professor Baron, even the headmaster. Elric's voice echoed overhead. "This is a match of applied magical logic. Points awarded for innovation, adaptability, and tactical awareness. You may win without landing a final blow if you demonstrate dominance." He paused. "Begin." Riven didn't move at first. He never did. He waited. I launched first. Wind burst, not to hit, but to disrupt the nearest platform fragment. The air pressure tilted the chunk toward me, closing the gap. I jumped. Cyclone step midair, landed low, and immediately split the ground between us with kinetic push, trying to isolate him, cut off his range. He lifted a finger. A simple motion. Spell. Arc line. Precision refraction cast. Effect. Redirects force vectors within a chosen angle. My push bent sideways. Fell harmlessly off the edge. He stepped forward onto the tilted platform like he planned it. I cast again. Air shear burst step. Trying to flank him. Spiral movement. Strike from a blind edge. But the moment I appeared behind him, a sigil exploded beneath my feet. Trap sigil. Timed reversal. Planted 4 seconds prior. I was thrown backward into open air. Falling. Panicked. Then twisted midair and cast kinetic jump. Angled sharply toward a lower fragment. Landed hard. Heart pounding. Breath short. Riven raised a hand. A pale white circle of light formed behind him. "You rely on terrain manipulation," he said. "Clever, but it depends on friction, on prediction." He pointed, and I am unreadable. Then he attacked, not with power, with method. Sigils bloomed across the platforms, 6 at once. Not traps, not bombs, anchors. They bound the field in place, froze the motion, killed my dynamic advantage. Wind armor flared around me. I dashed forward, casting reflex reading, tracing every twitch of his posture. But it wasn't enough. He baited my burst cast, then redirected it with an inversion curve. My spell struck a rebounding surface I didn't even see. Knocked me off balance. Again. Warning. Strategic overlap detected. Terrain advantage. Opponent plus 52%. Suggestion. Shift focus to neutralization and unpredictability. I gritted my teeth. If I play by his rules, I'd lose. So I broke them. I dove into a gap. Let myself fall between platforms. Then cast wind burst not to fly, but to bounce sideways off a stone wall and shoot under him. He didn't expect it. I emerged behind him, launched push at his legs. He stumbled, just a half step, but the crowd gasped, because it was the first time he'd been touched. I followed. Cyclone step, point-blank air shear, then a direct wind burst. But he countered with something new. Spell, multi-layer sigil, folded refraction array. Effect, absorbs frontal spells and channels momentum into rear release. My own burst curve around him and struck me from behind. I collapsed on one knee, chest heaving. HP, 43%. Mana, 27%. I was losing, badly. But Riven stopped. Didn't press. He stared down at me. "You're good," he said softly. "Not lucky. Not gifted. Just good." I looked up, spat blood from my lip. "That's all I need to be." He tilted his head. "I disagree." Then stepped back. "Let's end this." He began forming a full circle casting ring. 7 sigils. Interlinked. I couldn't win this straight. So I changed the game. I stood. Slowly. Cast wind armor again. Then whispered into my core. Kinetic jump. Twofold. Spiral path. The system flickered. Custom technique detected. Compound jump. Unstable. Mana cost. 18%. Launch sequence valid. I jumped twice. One push, one burst, twisting midair, falling diagonally like a collapsing star. I hit the sigil ring from the edge. Not with a spell, but with velocity. The formation cracked. He canceled. Stepped backward in surprise. And for the first time, he faltered. I pressed him. Wind burst, faint. Push low. Step behind. But he recovered. Slipped away. Then cast flashline. A light wave spell. It hit my side and sent me tumbling. When I stopped, I was flat on the platform. He stood above me. "Calm. You don't surrender," he said. "No," I rasped. "You could have 3 moves ago." "I could have," I said. "But then I wouldn't learn anything." He studied me, then lowered his hand. "I yield." The arena gasped. The system chimed. Duel ended. Riven Salus yields. Outcome. Incomplete victory. Duel recognized as tactical draw. Skill insight gained. Arc line theory locked. Bonus. +1 INT. +1 trait point. New status. Recognized duelist. Top 10 first years. Later, as the crowd thinned, Riven walked past me. Didn't stop. Didn't smile. But said, "You're not there yet." I nodded. "I know." Then he added, "But you're real." And vanished. I sat with Lyra on the balcony that evening, body sore, pride intact. "Did you win?" she asked. "No." "But you didn't lose." "No." She smiled. "So what now?" I looked out at the academy towers, at the sky above them, and said, "Now I build something better." Because this fight wasn't the end of Arc 1. It was the start of it. Not against Riven, but against my own